That right there is the new F-Truck. It runs on E10 fuel, has nearly 700 Newton meters of torque, and eats Landcruisers for breakfast. I asked you guys what you wanted to know, and in this episode, we answer all your questions. So, let's take a look at the new F-150. Now, before I dive into any of the nitty-gritty question answering, I think it's only fair that I run you through some of the specs of this particular model car. It's a 2024 Ford F-150 XLT. Now, unfortunately for me, it's all I can get my hands on. The XLT is the lowest spec that we're getting here in Australia of the Australian delivered Ford Australia models. That's not to say that it isn't an absolutely epic truck though. I've done a lot of driving so that I can really talk on this car from all its tech points and its actual drivability. So, I'm gonna pull out my phone, we're gonna go through some of the questions that you guys have actually sent in, and I'm gonna answer them. We can find out exactly what you guys think of what I think is a Landcruiser killer. Okay, the elephant in the room. More and more of these 150, 1500 spec American trucks are getting cut. And what I'm talking about is the fact that these big American yank tanks don't get the big beefy V8s or turbo diesels like what you might expect. But that's not to say these things are slouchy with the modern technology that the manufacturers are putting in these cars. The first question is from one of our followers. This is from Wilbur09. Now, Wilbur asks, what powers the F-150 and what are the engine specs? Now, it is a great question because a lot of people expect something different to what this actually is. This is the Ford 3.5 litre V6 twin turbo EcoBoost petrol engine, and it hauls ass. 298 kilowatts, 678 Newton meters of torque, which is class leading for a model like this. That's made it up to that 10-speed automatic, which we absolutely love. The only thing that I will mention with the particular model that we have, the XLT, is that it's column shift. So using it in manualized mode is basically AIDS. But that being said, it pulls like an absolute freight train, this thing, and is a lot of fun. Plus, I personally think you get a sick exhaust note out of these things. All the modern diesels and stuff, you got DPFs and all that business to worry about, but this thing just sounds sick. I hope that answers your question. Maybe drop a comment. Would you rather something like this with a modern spicy petrol, or would you like an old dinosaur burner diesel? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, on to the next question. Next question is from our boy Dorian Coletti, Doriani Coletti, and he wants to know solid axle front or IFS. Unfortunately, IFS. You have to go in the real big dogs to get a solid front end these days. The rear is solid, leaf springs, but the front is a McPherson strut type suspension setup, which I think is actually probably a good thing to help keep some of the drivability in the smaller, in the F-150s. As soon as you step up to, 350, 450, etc., it gets a bit much, but imagine a solid axle swapped F-150 coilovers. Holy. I'm getting carried away. Anyway, while I'm at the front here, I'll also mention that these things, when they convert them to right-hand drive here, they don't just do the whole dodgy, whole bunch of linkages and weird shit behind the dash and do it all sort of janked like a backyard conversion. Being a Ford Australia converted F-150 means they do it right. They actually replace the entire steering rack with a rack that's out of the Ranger Raptor. So you're getting a right-hand drive, Australian designed steering rack, and then they use spacers on the rack to make the wheel width and all that sort of stuff marry up. So in terms of front end, suspension, steering, geometry, and all that sort of stuff, it is freaking phenomenal, and it's actually really nice to drive. Even when you're hauling ass, fully loaded, this thing is absolutely planted, and I really do love it. While we're here, let's talk about rims. These things are relatively ugly. I'm not gonna lie to you. Look, factory rims are never gonna be that good looking, but these aren't gonna set the world on fire. So I think one of the first modifications you'd wanna do is probably put a nice set of alloys on there and some bigger, beefier tires. You are gonna struggle to fit a 35 or anything bigger under here though, because you can see how close up the front here it's coming to that front apron and even the back of the guard there. So again, food for thought. Our next question is from one of my favorite people, Hey Big Mac. He runs a fantastic four-wheel drive specific podcast if you're ever wondering about what he's up to. Now he has asked, what are the size differences in dimensions between the Ranger and the F-150. Now, this was an interesting one, and I was actually pretty keen to look this up because this car is actually lighter than the Ranger Raptor, for example, all aluminium, but is freaking huge, or at least feels huge. And I wasn't sure if it was because you've just got this massive front end and a huge tub and it sort of gives the illusion, or if it was actually a lot bigger. So anyway, I've crunched the numbers. The Ford Ranger has over 20 variants in the lineup, so it is hard to get a spec, but the Ford Ranger, you're looking at a width of 1910 millimeters and a length of around 5,225 millimeters. The F-Truck's width, 2,030 millimeters, and length is 5,884 millimeters. So you're looking at around 100 mil wider and around half a meter longer in the short wheelbase. Obviously, if you go long wheelbase with a long tub, it's gonna blow those numbers out of proportion as well. Plus, if you chuck flares and stuff like that on any of the cars, it's gonna change it. But 4 inches wider, half a meter longer in the short wheelbase model is pretty substantial. But if you're buying an F-150, you're not buying it to be subtle, you're not buying it to be worried about taking up space, if you know what I'm saying. Sometimes people love a big dog, that's all I'm saying. Okay, we've jumped inside the F-150, which is an absolutely lovely place to be. Now, a couple of questions we're gonna answer in here. One of them is a cracker, and that is from Joshua Madrigali. Now, Josh, if you're watching this, there's women and children that watch this channel, my boy. But anyway, we'll answer it anyway. Have you used road head mode yet? Now, I know it sounds crude and ludicrous, but it is a freaking funny feature that the Ford has. Now, I mentioned before, the XLT is column shift. The shifter is up here, which I freaking hate. In the Lariat, you get a really nicely integrated E-shifter down here. You press a button, it folds away. You're probably wondering why you'd need the shifter to fold away. Well, there's a lot of funny stuff going around online that Ford had designed the road head edition, but it's not quite that. The reason the shifter folds away, and the reason this is all flat intentionally, is because you can fold out your mobile workstation. Now, I've had my fun by saying things in the past, and I'm gonna say it again. I don't know whether this was designed for the businessman on the go, maybe a Pablo Escobar trying to package up your next order, or potentially you've got a lady of the night sitting next to you, but Ford, this is a freaky little feature and I'm all about it. No, I haven't used it yet, but goddamn is it tempting. Anyway, on to the next. While we're inside, let's talk another question from Dilsky. These names, usernames, I'm struggling with. What's the new inside features? Now, this is the first F-Truck that I've had, driven, spent a lot of time in. But the XLT does get skimped on a bit of features, but it's still jam-packed. Let me run you through. So you have a smaller screen up here, which is gonna have your Ford Sync, Android Auto, wireless CarPlay, and all that sort of stuff. You can make calls and that sort of thing. And like I mentioned, with the amount of sound deadening in this car, it is crystal clear, which is really cool. You get a very basic sort of air conditioning control system, which I actually really like. There's nothing worse than trying to use a touchscreen aircon control unit, so that's worth mentioning. You have your various drive modes, a factory rear locker. The cool thing about the XLT is that it is not full-time four-wheel drive. That is one benefit, I will say. It's all selectable from a button here. Ford have really gone ahead and thought out of how can we put enough tech in this car to stop you from drilling holes in our dash. So they've gone ahead and put an inbuilt electronic trailer brake controller in here. You can adjust the gain and all that sort of thing. They've also got the Pro Trailer Assist unit on here, which is a really cool thing. You can actually hook up your trailer, set it all up, and using this, you can actually steer your trailer by turning a dial on the dash. It gives you a camera, it flips the image. You want the trailer to go left while you're reversing, you turn the dial to the left, and the computer does all the whiz-bangery and turns the wheel in the opposite way to make reversing a big trailer easy. If you're a boomer and you're freaking out about towing your expensive caravan around, that's probably a fantastic feature. But if you're an old school like me and you're used to just towing trailers, you know, the normal way, it's very weird to use. A stack of charging spots, 2 USBs here, 12 volt here, 2 more USBs down in the cubby, and you've got 3 accessory ports in the back here. You've got more cup holders than I know what to do with, 2 in every door, 2 here, 2 here. You can put about 700 big gulps up in this, which is really cool. In front of me, we don't get the digital dash in the XLT, you just get a couple of analog gauges and a digital screen in the middle, which still gives you a stack of information. Overall, it's a really cool car to be in. It doesn't have auto wipers, or at least I haven't figured out how to use auto wipers. Doesn't have adaptive cruise control, and it doesn't have lane keep assist. It does let you know when you're departing a lane by giving a vibration through the steering wheel, but other than that, that's about all you're gonna get. For $107,000, I think you do get a lot of bang for buck. Very big cab. You can see I'm 6'2", I'm a big unit. heaps of space. You can adjust the pedals forwards and backwards from a button. You got a massive center console here. I think it's a sick place to be. Okay, this question is an actual cracker. So, is a lift kit worth it? Some other people, Eli Bozier, will you get a lift and new wheels, new tires, etc.? This is a hard one to answer. This isn't my car. Now, I know I've been given out that it is my car, and hopefully one day, one of these things will be. I'm lucky enough to be partnered with Ford, and they give me these press cars to f around with, drive around, test, review, and basically test. One thing that I would immediately change if this was my car is the suspension. One of the most popular things that people do on these American trucks is what's called a leveling kit, because they're so nose down in the front. It looks like the back's got a 4-inch lift and the front's got -1 inches. It actually looks like a wedge of cheese cruising down the highway, and it looks a little bit stupid. That being said, it's not like lifting a GQ or an 80 series, that's for sure. These things are expensive cars, they're heavy, and therefore seemingly expensive to lift. Now, a couple of options you can do. Strut spacers, easy lift blocks, and that kind of thing. It's gonna be cheap, between 500 and 1,000 bucks. But if you start looking at a full-blown Elka or BDS leveling kit, which is shocks, springs, and all that sort of gear, you're looking anywhere from sort of $7,000 to $12,000 for a kit. So that is expensive. They're also massive as it is. So as soon as you start jacking them up, you want to put bigger tires and wheels and all that sort of shit on there, suddenly they're going to become a bit more of a nightmare to drive around. But that being said, these hand cooks would go in the bin. A set of Maxxis Razor MTs, a nice set of bead locks, 6-inch lift. Whoo, that would be sick. Wishful thinking. Ford Australia, I know you're watching this. Maybe it's time to give Sambo a lariat. I'll show you how to build a really spicy F-150. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Okay, let's dive into another question, this time from the back. The next one is from Thomas Ravel. He has gone, do you think the F-150 is a good touring rig for a family of 5? Now, I jumped in the back to show you one thing specifically. I'm 6'2", I'm a long of a thing. That seat is still set up for me driving, so another 6'2" man, you have got headroom, arm room, like, you know, I've got space back here. You've got your own climate controls down here. You've got a stack of charging options down here for all your kids' entertainment stuff. Big seat pockets, heaps of storage in the doors. That's important because if you're a family of 5, 2 parents and 3 kids in the back, you want space. You don't want a tight cab. The kids are going to end up full WWEing in the back of this thing. So I think it's a really cool way that they've designed so much room into it. These things can tow 4.5 ton. They've got a massive payload, huge tub, massive amount of space in here, great fuel economy. Family of 5, as far as touring goes, this thing would be sick. Okay, this next question is from my buddy Wrong Turn Adventures. How does it compare to the Ranger Raptor? Now, this thing has got very similar power, but is a lot more mellow, a lot more mature in the way it delivers it. So, if you want something that can really tow, punch out long kilometers, great on fuel, and heaps of space, F-150 is the ute for you. Okay, this next question is from Forward Impressions. Now, he is asking 2 questions, and I'm gonna answer them. The first is it worth upgrading from a 200 series to an F-150? The honest answer is maybe. It depends what you want out of your four-wheel drive. The 200 series is probably gonna be better for four-wheel driving, probably gonna be cheaper for parts, and there's gonna be more parts available out there. That being said, the power, the space, the towing capabilities of an F-150, for very similar money, it's hard to pass up. So that really is up to you. The next question is what is required to be upgraded to tow 3.5 tons smoothly? Now, I personally don't think anything. Under here is a 70mm tow ball, which means you can tow the full 4.5 ton, which this car is rated to do so. And it's been factory fitted with an electronic trailer brake controller, so you're actually pretty much good to go. I think maybe you could get one of those torsion style tow hitches to take a little bit of load between the heavy trailer and the car. But other than that, I think you're gonna really enjoy towing with this thing. Obviously, if you're gonna be hauling heavy shit all the time, chuck some airbags and some heavy duty suspension in the but other than that, I think it's gonna absolutely love it. Okay, this next question is actually another cracker, and this is from Broken Durry. Interesting username and probably an interesting bloke. He's gone, how does she go in a car park? Regular driving on the road, general life. Fantastic question. Now, this is something that I was really intrigued to get my head around because obviously I've driven big cars, but nothing quite as big as this and certainly not daily driving. Like I said, I've done 2,500 kilometers and around 26 hours behind the saddle. between Brisbane and Sydney, all around Sydney, around the Central Coast. We went to a wedding, we've done all sorts of shit with this car. I've driven it in tight car parks, in Newtown of Sydney, I've driven it on the highway, I've driven it around Brisbane. I've done a lot. And here is what I've found. For starters, you didn't ask, but I'll give it to you. Fuel economy, surprisingly good for a petrol car like this that's built like a bread box. On the highway, we were getting between 10.5 and 11 litres per 100. I think it's a 100 litre tank, you're gonna get over 1,000 k's range, which is super, super sick. The cruise control, all that jazz, makes life really easy. To live with this car in the city, I think would be a struggle. I'm not gonna lie to you, it is huge. It's wider than some lanes, it's hard to park, and I'm talking about the short wheelbase version, might I add. I know some people out there love the long wheelbase, but I just don't know if you could get away with that in the city. It makes it very, very difficult. A whole lot more tech in the Lariat than you do in the XLT, which I think would make it a nicer place to be. But that being said, the XLT is still phenomenal for driving around. Comfy seats, great climate control, wireless CarPlay, Android Auto, all that sort of shit. It's extremely quiet in the cab. The exhaust isn't super loud. Even the glass tinting is acoustic layered, so it really cuts down on a lot of road noise and a lot of wind noise and that sort of thing when you're cruising around. We've had this thing from all sorts of speeds and it really is planted, feels great, etc. And there's so much room in the cab. We had a couple of mates in the back of it at one point as well. It's rare you get a car these days where you get 3 adults in the back seat and you're not all shoulder to shoulder like a bunch of fucking sardines, whereas these guys, mate, you could put a couple of vertically challenged people in between them even if you needed to, you know what I'm saying? It's bloody, there was space between shoulders for days. So I do really think you could live with it. Around town you'd probably struggle. Obviously it does hang out the front of car parks and stuff, but hey, it is what it is. You want to drive a big daddy, you gotta fucking live like one, you know what I'm saying? This final question is from James Speziali, one of my mates, and he has gone out of his way to reply, and he's asked, can it pull my mum? Mate, just about anyone driving anything could pull your mum. Anyway, doesn't matter. Is the Ford F-150 a true Landcruiser killer? Is it a Ram killer? Is it a Chev Silverado killer? I think so, but I'm gonna leave that up to you guys. There are some fantastic options out there on the market. I'm lucky enough to poke my schnoz around this thing, and I am absolutely stoked with it. Unfortunately, I do have to take this one back to Ford though, but I think I'm about to get my slippery little fingers on a new Ranger Raptor, so that is gonna be pretty cool. Now, if you do have any questions that I didn't quite get to answer in this video, do drop them in the comments below, and I'd love to try and reply to them. If not, make a follow-up video where we actually get to take this thing off-road and do a bit of a towing test with it. I'd love to hitch up something freaking heavy, drag it around the country and see just how well it does as a factory out-of-the-box towing vessel. But anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe, share it around. Before we say goodbye, I'm gonna start it up. We're gonna give it a rev. We'll let you hear this thing. We'll see you next Thursday.